Hey everybody, this is Andy from Tennis Euphoria, and today I'm bringing you a bit of a different video. I've certainly gone off schedule, got distracted, as I guess a lot of us racket geeks do. I was sourcing a Wilson Ultra Pro and have been playing with that along with my old Ultra Tour review coming up, so subscribe to the channel if you want to see that review. But in doing that, I noticed that there was some offers on some Wilson rackets, particularly across the blade line at the moment, across some retailers, and it got me to thinking maybe I should have a look at that, particularly as some of them are potentially decent rackets for your sort of intermediate to advanced player, as well as maybe some advancing junior players. I also had one racket that really sort of piqued my interest within that line. So the racket that piqued my interest is the Wilson Blade 101L. Piqued my interest because it's a 101 head size, but it has that 1620 string pattern that I'm a big fan of. In many respects, this is not a racket that I would typically consider. It is very, very light in stock form. So interesting, I've had a look at that. Also, in response to a couple of people messaging me after my Wilson Blade V7 1619 review, I'm also going to have a look at the 98S, which is certainly a different racket. And it's been a really interesting journey, particularly with the 101L. I decided that I would customize that up towards my specs and see if the slightly thicker beam that you find on the 101L combined with the 1620 could make it a good racket also for advanced players. And so I'll document in this video how I went about customizing that up towards specs that I would probably prefer. A big disclaimer, I'm a massive amateur when it comes to customizing rackets. I'm a good stringer, but I tend to think that I know what I'm doing when I'm customizing rackets, and certainly I got this 101L up to a level that it was playing really nice, but I'm fully expecting there to be some criticism about how I went about that customization, so go easy on me. As I say, I'm a bit of an amateur when it comes to customizing rackets. Looking at the specs in stock form with the 98S, we have a 98 square inch head, really interesting 18 by 16 string pattern, quite light 295 unstrung weight, but then a 33.6 balance point, perhaps indicating weight distribution towards the head. In the 101L, we've got that 101 square inch head, slightly thicker beam, 1620 string pattern, and I'm always a big fan of 1620 string patterns, really light 274 unstrung weight with a 33 centimeter balance. So again, a little bit of weight towards the head in the racket in stock form, which I don't typically mind in my rackets. Start with the 98S, and this will be a shorter video than usual. I'll spend more time on the 101L than the 98S. With the 98S, I would summarize it as being a little bit mental, really. I played with it in some hitting, one game of singles, and then a little bit of doubles, and the launch angle is just huge. It's the only way I can describe it, and also the sort of dive down and cut into the spin that you get is also pretty immense, and so with that brings both positives and negatives. On the positive side, it's very difficult to hit a ball into the net when you're playing with the 98S because of that huge launch angle. Another positive is you can get good spin, as I hope I demonstrate in this video. You can kind of cut some nice angles because you know the ball's going to cut down and land in the court. And also I was finding that you could just have a base sort of tactic of hitting deep, hitting with lots of spin, and the person on the other end of the court is going to struggle to deal with it because it really does deliver a lot of spin. It was fast through the air at 295, easy to handle, sort of maneuverable. I actually found that for doubles it was pretty effective. You could hit quite big flat first serves. Because of that string pattern, you could swing slice serves out wide. You could also get good kicks on your second serve because of the spin, and at net it was sort of pretty okay. Not as good as a heavier racket in terms of stability. You know, maybe it could be a good double stick. I was left with an overall impression that this is probably a good stick for someone to experiment with if they are at a kind of intermediate to advanced level, or they're a weekend warrior just wanting something that will help them out with big serves, help them make sure they get it back over the net. Could really appeal to a junior who plays with some sort of extreme Western grips. It gives them an alternative to the pure aero or some other spin rackets that are out there, and it does certainly offer a bit more comfort than those rackets. So maybe those two groups could get on quite well with the 98S. It isn't as much fun as playing with other rackets like the other blade lines, where you can be more creative, slice and dice, play with touch and feel. So not quite the racket for me, but interesting nevertheless. And then we come on to the 101L. So first of all, pretty hard to sort of find out details about this racket online. Well, it's obviously got the V7 design. The thicker beam is evident, and I felt it was more stiff than the rest of the blade lines, but I don't have a way of measuring RA and I couldn't find the details online. But certainly it felt not uncomfortable, but a bit stiffer than the rest. Wondered then whether it shared some sort of mold characteristics with the old Steam line maybe, but wasn't sure. It came strung up with Wilson Sensation, and the string job was kind of all over the place. Tension really varied across the string bed. So my initial hit with it in its stock form with those strings and at the 274 was actually better than I expected. I mean, it was fairly easy to swing. Occasionally I found the ball would just kind of drop into the net. I think that's just got something to do with the lack of weight in the racket. But it wasn't horrible to play with, and I felt that maybe for a intermediate or starter player, if they were to buy this racket and invest in a better strings, then maybe it could be something that you could get on with. Determined to see what I could make of it, I started to customize. So my first step was to see what I had in the handle, and to my surprise there was a little bit of silicone in there already. So I removed that, and then I injected more silicone, got about 10 grams of that into the handle. I'm obviously looking to make quite a big weight improvement on the racket from 274. Wanted to take it up to about maybe 303 unstrung, because the slightly bigger head size would give it a bit more stability than a smaller head size. It already has quite a lot of weight in the head, so that was my starting point. And then I added a leather grip, and as this was all kind of budget orientated and experimental, I went with what I think is quite a good but cheap leather grip made by Gamma. That was taking the weight up quite nicely, as you can see from this picture. I'd certainly added a bit of weight at that end of the racket just from adding the silicone and also from that leather grip. Next step was to get some better strings in it, and whilst I was doing that, get some lead onto the racket too. So I cut out the Sensation, took off the bumper guard, and as you can see, added a little bit of weight, not a lot, at 10, 2 and 12 under the bumper guard, so it would be nice and hidden. My only real motivation there was to counterbalance really some of the weight that I was going to put through the rest of the racket, as overall I wasn't worried about changing balance point. If anything, I wanted to arrive at a similar balance point of kind of late 32s, 33, as I quite like some weight in the head. And then from there I added a bit more weight, a more significant amount at 3 and 9, which I hoped would help with some stability, particularly at net. Also with the added weight at the top, combined with that, should get some more plow, and then also again balanced that out and brought the overall static weight of the racket up with some lead right down in the hoop, as you can see in the pictures. I finished, I'd pretty much nailed it, 325 grams with strings, which is about where I wanted to be given the head size. Also the balance point was at 33, where I wanted it to be, and I'd put Solinco Hyper G, one of my favourite strings, into the racket, which would just really help it anyway, I felt, compared to a shoddily done string job of Wilson Sensation. And I have to say it really worked. I really enjoyed the racket. So I was playing really well with it, with some good players, regular hitting partners from the baseline. One in particular is a much better player than me, and I was worried that maybe the racket would sort of show me up in my hitting session with him, but actually no, I was playing really well with it. I was finding my targets, certainly getting easy depth, getting some good stability from the racket, and then when I moved on to some more points, I performed really well with the racket as well. One drill that I always do with one of my hitting buddies is quite a neat drill. You take it in turns to play up to 10. You only hit your second serve and you have to follow in on your second serve, and you play the point out from there up to 10. It's a particularly hard drill for the server to win because invariably the returner gets on top with their returns from the second serve. So I thought it'd be really interesting to use the racket for that drill, and it really pleasantly surprised me. Second serves, I could find my targets, but the weight I'd added and that slightly thicker beam, I was able to get pretty good kind of directional pace and some spin on those second serves, and it was stable enough now at net. It was pretty forgiving in some respects because of that head size, and what I found was if you got into a rally as well, I was benefiting from the 16-20 string pattern. I felt that I was picking targets pretty well. Overall thoughts then, I mean, the blade line has got a lot of rackets within it. Hope that's helped to give some ideas. Certainly the 16x19 and the 18x20 are the two that advanced players should look at. I really like those rackets. If I'm honest, I think that sort of intermediate and perhaps beginner players, if they're looking at a blade, should probably go with the 100L in stock form. I think that's probably the best racket for that profile of player. I still think the 98S could be interesting for those weekend warriors who don't really care too much about their game apart from winning as many points as they can through kind of basic tactics. Also think that could work well as an alternative from a comfort perspective to your kind of stiff Babolat users, juniors who are looking for sort of adult rackets but play with Western style grips to keep that launch angle coming down and in. And with regards to the 101L, then I think that's a really interesting racket because of that slightly thicker beam and 16-20 string pattern for us racket geeks to play around with up to our specs, and I actually think it's a really good racket customized. I'll be holding on to it for sure. It's retailing so cheap at the moment that even with the leather grip and the strings it was about £80 I think, so a bit of a bargain too. Love to hear your comments on that. Any racket geeks out there love playing around with rackets, get hold of a 101L, get it up to your specifications and let me know what you think. Next up will be the Wilson Ultra Pro V3, back to my more typical, more in-depth, more footage reviews for that one. Really enjoying that racket, and I'm comparing it to the previous Ultra Tour version 2 version, so that should be up in the next week or so. In the meantime, give this a like if that was helpful, and please subscribe to the channel because that really helps me out, and see you soon.